In this video, we're going to look at the topic of communication. This is a dimension in the TTESS rubric, but it is also something that is another foundational skill that teachers need to have, and they also at times have to teach it to their kids. So let's dive in. So let's look at what the rubric says. With the communication dimension, it says that the teacher establishes classroom practices that provide opportunities for most students to communicate with the teacher and their peers. Not that the teacher can communicate with the peers, but that the students can communicate. The teacher uses probing questions to clarify and elaborate on the learning. So if it seems like a student may not understand something, they ask a question to see what they mean, or if they understand it, maybe asking a question to extend the thinking. Also providing explanations that are clear and use verbal and written communication that is clear and correct. So not only are you verbally communicating to your kids, are you also giving them written communication that is clear to the point and that they understand. So one way to make sure that you're really communicating effectively is to make sure that you're modeling your performance expectations for various assignments. Different ways that you can do this. You can provide examples. These can be, I've seen this with videos. This was something that was really helpful in some elective classes I watched where they're trying to master maybe a certain skill. You could do this if you're trying to show a certain hold for an instrument or a certain way to place your hands to make a certain note, showing them some type of video. If you're doing a social studies assignment where you're having the kids do some type of acting out or role play, maybe you show them an example from that time period where they get an idea of how they should have the role play go. Exemplars, these are usually maybe former student work. This could also be if you make an example to show the kids. One little piece of advice with the exemplars is if you are making one to show the kids, make sure it's not an option that the kids can choose. So if you are picking from various parts of the food web and one of their options is to do a food web of marine life and your exemplar is of marine life, the problem you might have with that is the kids may just copy your exemplar. So make sure that whatever you show them is it shows them how to do the assignment, but it doesn't give them the answers per se. One of my favorites that I used a lot with my students was the think aloud. And this is whenever you stand up there and you think like the student and you talk out your thinking. And this is a way to show your thought process. Whenever I would get ready for maybe teaching them how to analyze a certain piece of text or something like that, I wanted to show how to annotate the text or how to go through and look up for maybe the who, what, when, where, why. I would put the example up on the screen or up on the board, and then I would talk with the student, say, okay, as if I am a student in our class, this is how I would think through answering this question. And so then that even gives them a way to think, okay, this is how I should be thinking when I'm answering this question. When I've asked students about that, the students kind of find it awkward the first time you do it because you're kind of talking to yourself. It helps them to understand how they should be completing the assignment, and it ends up being effective. Another one I've seen that works well in class is, let's say you're trying to show, this is whenever you're doing some type of maybe student movement or activity, especially if you're doing a gallery walk or something like that, then this is where you can get a volunteer up to the class and you and the student act out or model how the kids should be performing the assignment. So these are some different ways to model your performance expectations so that you can thoroughly communicate what you want the kids to do. Somebody's come into the strategy that I know a lot of you already know, but I just want to make sure that I point it out in case there's that few of you that have never heard of I do, we do, you do. This is the gradual release of responsibility model. And this is another one that really helps with scaffolding and gradually letting the students go with learning something. This is good for whenever you are starting a new skill. So the first part is you model your performance expectations. So those examples I showed in the previous slide. So this could be when you do your think aloud. This could be your video examples. It could be your exemplars. This is where you model how to answer the question. The next part we do is whenever either as a class or in their small groups, they complete the skill or question or the next part of the activity. And then you do is whenever the students complete the assignment independently. This works well with whenever you have multiple pieces of practice for the kids to do. So let's say you have 6 math problems and you do, I do, we do, you do, to get them into answering the questions, or you're trying to show them how to calculate the volume of a sphere. Well, then you start with modeling with a think aloud, how you go about finding the formula, finding your pieces for your height and your base, and you show that in that way through an I do answering the question, and then you complete a problem as a class where we find the volume of a sphere, and then the kids do it on their own. This is a really simple strategy, but it's a very effective one, and it really helps you to communicate, and that communication leading towards mastery of the objective. Another part of communication is being able to recognize when your students are confused or when they don't understand what it is they're doing. So this really is where your intuition can come in and be of use. This is whenever you need to know, when are the kids, how do you know when they're confused? Is it a look on their face? You know, that blank stare? Is it body language? It could also be questions you ask. It could be doing a thumbs up, thumbs down. There's a lot of different ways that you can check and see if the students are confused. A lot of times, you know, before you even have to say anything verbal or ask a question, just from their body language, their look, what they've written on their paper or haven't written on their paper. But the best thing to do is to make sure when your kids are working, you must circulate, because that's whenever you can catch that when they're confused, because you don't want to, the last thing you want to do is be that teacher that sits at your desk while the kids are working on an assignment and you don't catch the 5 or 6 kids in your class that are completely confused and need you to do a quick reteach or a quick explanation of what it is they're doing. Also, knowing, how do you know when the students are not engaged? This could also be through their behaviors, and this also goes back to that circulating. If you're circulating, you can see if the kids are engaged. You can see if, again, is there anything written on their paper? Are they talking about what they did last weekend? Are they talking about who scored touchdowns at the football game? Or are they talking about the discussion questions they're supposed to be talking about? How you find that out, you've got to be present and you've got to be circulating. If you have to ask clarifying questions, that's another way to check for that engagement and to see if they're confused. Let's say you are circulating and you're starting to see some misunderstandings. So it doesn't hurt to have different ways to approach those misunderstandings. Let's say you're walking around and you circulate and you realize, wow, the kids really are not getting how to do this assignment, and it's over half of the class. That's when I would address the class. If it's over half, that's whenever, if I were you, I would address the whole class. Okay, let's look over this again. I noticed, and it's okay to say, I noticed that some of you are struggling with this assignment or with this skill. And if you're telling them that, if I think it makes them feel more comfortable to know that it's not just one of them that's struggling, if they know it's a whole group. Let's say you have maybe 5 to 10 kids that just aren't getting it. Well, that would be whenever you might want to pull a small group, do a little reteach, a little further explanation. And then during all of this, it is very important to have specific, high quality feedback. The last thing you want to do is tell a kid, oh, good job. Nope, don't want to do that. You don't want to tell them get to work. Kids need more specific than that. Your high quality feedback. I really like the way that you used your formula chart to find the right formula to answer the question. Give them something specific and high quality. Stay away from that good job statement or get to work statement. Give them something specific so they know what to do. Even if they're not engaged, instead of saying, why aren't you working? Say, I need you to be answering number 3, for example. Give them specifically what you want them to do and specifically what you see is going on. If you see that they're disengaged, say that to them. Give them that feedback. If they are not understanding, just say, I see from the look on your face and looking at your paper that you may not understand the assignment. Do you understand it? Give that specific feedback. Don't be vague. So some final tips for effective student communication with teachers. You want to make sure that you teach the kids to answer and complete sentences. So to help with that, it's okay to have sentence stems to help them so that they can repeat part of the question within their answer and you know what they're answering. Have different ways for the kids to know what to say instead of I don't know. There's all kinds of posters out there and other resources that give you other quotes that they can say. You know, may I have more information? That's another big one that they can use. May I ask a friend for help? Things like that. Give them other prompts to use besides I don't know. Try to eradicate that phrase from your classroom. Another thing to do for effective communication is is the whole just take a dipstick, see where they're at. Middle of the lesson, do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Do a fist of five. A fist being I have no clue what I'm doing. Five, I could go and teach it to the whole class. Give them those chances to give you either a visual cue or a verbal cue. Knock on your desk if you understand if you understand the directions. Things like that. Let them have some maybe tactile dipsticks or even verbal so you can see, okay, where are my kids at this part in the lesson? That would be another way to really communicate with your students and they communicate with you. So these are just some very brief communication tips, and it's not just teaching your performance expectations to your kids and communicating how you want the assignment to be done and making sure it's clear. It's also seeing how do I know when my kids aren't understanding the material? How do I know when they're not engaged? And what do I do to address it to make sure that they master the objective?